eating insects may offer environmental benefits. Brits would be told to eat bugs under bonkers green plans by civil servants. That's a story in the Sun of the UK. But at the same day, I see a story in the Wall Street Journal. Switzerland wants children to eat less chocolate, more insects. Companies pitch bugs to young consumers at schools. Spicy mealworms don't fly with Anna. Blech. I was recently in Switzerland when I was there to cover Davos, and they love their chocolate. They're the world's foremost chocolatiers, though the Belgians would quarrel with that. Imagine replacing that with bugs. Joining us now, right, is the boss of ClimateDepot.com to help us make sense of all of this. Mark, great to see you. There was a war on cheap, clean energy. Now there's a war on nutritious, natural food. How are they connected?
They're all connected. There's also a war on private car ownership and gas-powered cars. This is all very simple, Ezra. If you know who the players are, and you, of course, do know, but I mean, if you look at this from the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, the World Health Organization, players like Bill Gates, George Soros, it's a very simple vision. Their stated public goal, and I can go through dozens of examples on everything where they actually say higher food prices are good to get people to eat, higher energy prices are good for the green agenda. But their goal is to intentionally collapse our energy system to create a transition to what they're seeking, solar, wind, green energy, and limited resources. Their intention is to collapse our transportation system, banning of gas-powered cars, and that goes actually pretty deep because you have the World Bank telling the automakers they're not going to be funding for gas-powered cars. You have corporate banks not going to give out car loans. You have now cities and towns in Colorado, California voting for no new gas stations, which will, even if you own a gas-powered car, you're going to start facing gas shortages. And then, of course, they're trying to collapse our current agriculture and food system. And they're doing that in so many different ways, but all under the umbrella pretty much of the net zero agenda. And the net zero agenda, as you alluded to, Ezra, deals with the Netherlands as the first test case, where the idea is you can't have nitrogen because nitrogen creates nitrous oxide. It's a greenhouse gas. We've got to go after these farmers. We're going to put in heavy, big restrictions. And guess what? They're only going to affect the small family-run traditional farms up to 11,000 in the Netherlands, not the big agribusiness, corporate, Chinese, Bill Gates, mega giant firms that run them. They can absorb all these new net zero costs. It's the small farms. And if you relate that back to COVID, who could afford the lockdown mandates that went on for years? Big corporations and retail chains, not the small mom and pops. It's the same thing. They are collapsing food, energy, and transportation, and to boot our free speech as well, and throw in our financial system as well, devaluing our currency. So they're doing all of this intentionally, and it's to create a new world order / Great Reset.
You know, what you're saying sounds shocking. Each part of it is shocking. Together, it's almost too much to believe. But I know for a fact each element you've described is there. I mean, here's a famous video that I always tweet on Twitter. It's Bill Gates coming up with a mathematical formula and he says, we absolutely have to reduce the number of humans in the world. This is a TED Talk he gave. Look at this, absolutely terrifying. Imagine putting this guy in charge of the world's vaccines, for example. Take a look at this.
It's an average about 5 tons for everyone on the planet. And somehow we have to make changes that will bring that down to zero. It's been constantly going up. It's only various economic changes that have even flattened it at all. So we have to go from rapidly rising to falling and falling all the way to zero. This equation has 4 factors, a little bit of multiplication. So you've got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to zero. And that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person's using on average, the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to zero. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. That's back from high school algebra. But let's take a look. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. But there we see an increase of about 1.3.
So you said a lot of astonishing things there, but I just happen to know that everything you said, I mean, the craziest thing, and I literally dry heave whenever I think about it. Here's Bill Gates, who's buying up all the farmland in America. I think he's now the largest farmland owner in America. Here he is promoting the drinking of what he calls poop water. Take a look.
Over 2.5 billion people have no access to safe sanitation. We asked brilliant engineers to help us solve this problem. And one of those engineers actually has proposed a solution where the waste is valuable.
The Omni processor turns sewer sludge, which is kind of nasty, into clean drinking water, electricity, and ash that is pathogen-free.
I am very impressed with this solution we're seeing here. It generates electricity, it generates clean water.
It will grow to every corner of the earth that needs it because it makes money every day.
It's water.
I cannot mention that without literally gagging. I apologize. But there is something so repulsive about that. Talk about bugs. Why do they want us to eat bugs?
Well, bugs, this has been going on now for decades. The UN Agriculture Report, back when I worked in the United States Senate Environment Committee, they issued a report 2007 in the United Nations saying that cow emissions, i.e. methane, were more damaging to the earth than the entire transportation sector, planes, trains, automobiles combined. So they've had cows and meat eating in their target for decades. We've had UK climate advisors say that we want to make meat rare and expensive. We've had the former UN climate chief, Christina Figueres, say we want to basically turn meat eaters the way we used to do smokers in their own small, uncomfortable section in restaurants. That's how it started. Then they've come out with even more reports basically calling for an end to meat eating in the industrialized West. What Bill Gates, as you mentioned, stated goal is to get Europe, United States, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and all Western nations off of eating livestock grown animal meat. His stated goal is to have us eat synthetic, fake meat grown from stem cells from a cow or a lamb or sheep and put into a steel vat in a laboratory and then add all sorts of additives, antibiotics thrown in, and then it comes out to a puree paste, and I'm not making this part up, that you then print it up on a 3D printer, several kilograms an hour, and you can have your steak dinner, in quotes. I mean, it is actually a form of meat. It's derived from the animal, so it's not a veggie burger.
You know,
but that's what they want. That's his stated goal, and he'll have huge sway in agricultural policy to make that happen.
That was an excerpt from the Ezra Levant Show. I'm Ezra Levant. Every weekday, I do a monologue about the topic of the day. Then I interview a fascinating guest either in studio or via Skype. And then I read your mail, whether it's fan mail or hate mail, which is sometimes even more interesting. This is on our premium service, though, called Rebel News Plus. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. It's $8 a month or less if you buy a whole year in advance. You get my show every weeknight, plus Sheila Gunn Reid's show every week. It's called The Gun Show. It's pretty amazing. You know, we rely on you because we do not take a dime from the government. In Canada, that makes us almost unique. So please help us out and help yourself to some great journalism at rebelnewsplus.com.